And I'm going to pass it over to Rob, who's going to officially call us to order while I get my slides up.
I'm sorry, were you asking me to call us to order? I apologize.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just want to welcome everybody here. Hopefully we can look forward to meeting in person again someday with the way things are looking, but it's good to see everybody. And I think it's exciting, just the work we're going to be reviewing today and all the great work that the staff have been doing. And I especially really enjoyed watching Heidi's video. And so I don't know if people had a chance to watch that, but it just reminded me of all the great work that's going on around the state, around Safe Routes to School.
Welcome. And a surprise is that we were wondering if you would actually go through over the goals for the day, but since I didn't ask you ahead of time, you can feel free to kick that back at me and Chris.
Sure, I'll let you do that.
Awesome, thank you. Our goals for today are for the committee to offer insight into identified grant funding challenges and opportunities for the Safe Routes to School education program, really focusing in on Heidi Manlove's education program for Safe Routes to School, provide direction to develop a funding approach for fiscal year 2023 Safe Routes to School education grant cycle. So Heidi will lead y'all through that conversation and we'll have a breakout room around that. And review for discussion our proposed revisions to the guiding principles. So we got a lot of good feedback and there's some more discussion that we need to do probably before we can move forward. So these are our main goals for the day. And we want to welcome you all here. So a couple of housekeeping things are the Zoom slide. I think most people are familiar with Zoom, but this strip that you see at the top of this Zoom screen is what you'll see at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and it'll allow you to mute, unmute, start and stop video. You can see who's also a participant. You can also find the chat function there, which is where you can ask questions if you'd like to, as well as if you are not a committee member to put that you are interested in providing public comment. Let's jump into our first, I apologize, we have an introduction activity. Since we can't all be together, we want to create space for people to mingle a little bit as part of being on the committee. So our introductory activity is a question brought to you by your new chair and vice chair, Rob Innerfeld and Carolina Reta Gonzalez. We would like for you to share a 2-minute story from your childhood. Tell a story about when you went on a walk or a bike ride when you were little and how walking or biking played a role in your childhood. So you're going to be directed to a breakout room with one other person. Each of you will have 2 minutes to tell a story from your childhood about walking, when you walk somewhere or bike somewhere, or how walking and biking affected your childhood. Tammy is going to shoot us into those breakout rooms. Ha!
Aha!
This is somebody I know, but I don't even know if I've ever heard this about you before. So you first.
That's fantastic. Sure. Let's see. A big thing for me was when I was in the Boy Scouts, we did a bicycling merit badge. And part of that, we had to learn all the safety skills. And so I think that was like my first introduction to learning about like bike safety. And my dad was a big part of that because he was really, really into cycling. And part of that merit badge was to ride, I think it was like 50 miles or something like that. And so we rode our bikes around the rim of Crater Lake. And that was kind of like one of the biggest, impactful cycling things that I did when I was a kid that kind of got me into the sport aspect of it, which then later transferred into, moving around from point A to point B.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Did y'all like camp out while you were down there, or you grew up close to there?
Yeah, I grew up in Medford, so it was just an hour and a half drive up to Crater Lake to do it, and we did it with a good portion of our Boy Scout troop. So there was
Boy Scout.
10 or 15 other kids and a couple of dads, and yeah, it was a big deal because I was in my younger teens, and that's a long way to go on a bike as a little kid.
Yeah, that is a long way to go on a bike as a little kid.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, that's my story. What about you?
I grew up on a cul-de-sac and we rode bikes a lot on the cul-de-sac, like no hand bike riding, like trying to like swerve around, trying to learn how to ride, learn how to ride on the cul-de-sac. It's pretty fun. My dad taught me to ride when I was little, like running behind the seat. And
Nice.
And then I got into biking to get places, probably more in adulthood. Like I never rode anywhere. We just played with bikes on the street. And I moved to New York City, and biking was like the cheapest way to get anywhere. So it's like, this is my best form of transportation at this point, because it was very cheaper. During the summer, I wouldn't even buy like a subway, monthly subway pass, because I would just bike everywhere.
Wow. I didn't know you lived in New York.
I did. I was very broke all the time. So I was always looking for ways to save money. And so the bike was a very cheap way to get around town.
That's awesome.
And I would say that like I love biking, but probably my passion is around walking. And this, but I love hiking and long distance hiking, and that has really translated into incorporating walking for transportation as part of my day whenever I can swing it. And so as a kid, I really liked camping, but probably the most influential walking experience I had was backpacking. And it was probably the first backpacking experience I had, and that was in the Grand Canyon. And I really appreciated the ability to be able to go slowly and to be able to kind of like look around and well, when you're in a canyon, you can look back and you can see where you were, and then you can look ahead and see where you're going. So that was always really important to me. That anyway, that experience was really great.
That's awesome. I can relate to the backpacking.
Yeah. I was like, you can relate to this one.
Absolutely.
When did you get into backpacking?
Same. It was within the Boy Scouts. I guess the Scouts were a big deal for me. I haven't thought about them in a while, but yeah, we do overnight and weekend trips, and then we do like 15-milers, and the big one was to do a 50-miler, and that took like I don't know, a week to do. We did several of those, and so that's what inspired me to walk Oregon first, and then walk from Bend to Canada, and then do the whole PCT in one go as well. And I miss that. I wish my life was in a, I don't know, different situation to do more through hiking or long distance backpacking. It's just the best. Yeah, it slows everything down. I mean, you can go really far on your own 2 feet, which is also amazing to think about. Like I walked from there to the, like that's cool. It's just neat to think about, especially as a kid. Like, wow, I can really take myself places. So, and now I'm running a ton, and that's my version of being able to do that right now. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm going to leave the breakout room only because I got a chat from our note taker that says that she can't get on. And so I need to figure out who's going to take notes. But it was good to catch up, Brian.
You too. Right on.
All right. See you in a minute.
Okay.
Hey, looks like folks are coming back. We're going to do the big round of introductions next, because I realized I didn't even introduce myself yet. But I got a note while I was in that meeting room that our note taker is having internet problems. She says she can't get on the meeting. She needs the meeting link. 1 second.
Hello.
Hello.
Chris.
I guess we're leaving.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good story.
That was enjoyable.
How did I get popped into this one? That's weird.
We were mid-story, weren't we?
How did that happen? I'm only seeing some people. This is weird. There it goes.
It sounds like I'm looking at the chat. I'm getting some direct messages about my note taker problem. Yes, Hannah, if you could start taking notes, that would be awesome. And I'm going to figure out how to send Tracy, try to problem shoot getting Tracy on the call while we do introductions. But I'm going to share my screen one more time. And I think Carolina Ireta Gonzalez is going to lead us through introductions.
Sounds good. Let me know if I forget something, but yeah, we just want to make sure that we have a moment for everybody to introduce themselves, get their voices in the room. And so if you can just say your name, where you work or what organization you represent. And was there anything else to the introduction, Leanne?
Nope, that's great. You might want to call on folks just because that's a little bit easier, or have people popcorn themselves around, but whatever you would like to do.
Okay, I'll start off, and just so that you can so I can go first, and then I see that there's like a list. I was thinking we could just go down that list. So my name is Carolina Ireta Gonzalez. I'm the vice chair. I work with the Oregon Health Authority. And so I kind of bring a health voice to the committee. And I wanted to make a really quick personal announcement. I don't think that's me. Not sure. Yeah, we can make sure that everybody's muted as we go through introductions. So a personal announcement, I'm currently about 7.5 months pregnant. So I'll be going into maternity, or I'll be having maternity leave sometime probably at the end of the spring, early summer. So if you don't see me in the future meetings for like 2 or 3 months, that's why. All right, so the next person is Sunny on the list.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sunny Chickering. I work for the Oregon Department of Transportation, and I'm appointed by the director to represent the agency here on the committee. It's nice to see you all.
And then if you can just name the next person on the list. So Sunny, okay. I don't know if you see, but.
How about Trevor?
My name is Trevor Arnold. I'm a lieutenant with Medford Police Department. I represent the traffic. I'm a traffic safety representative, and happy to be here. Oh shoot, Brian.
Excellent, thank you. My name is Brian Potwin. I'm the Executive Director of Commute Options. I'm also happy to be here, and let's go back up to the top of the list with Mavis.
Hi, I'm Mavis. I am your OBPAC representative, so the Oregon Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, OBPAC. And I live in the Grand, and I have a bike shop. And so we should go with, did Trevor already go? Trevor went. Kim.
Hello, I'm Kim Crabtree. I am the Director of Transportation for Bend Lapine Schools. Happy to be here today. Let's see, sorry, forgot my rules. Next, Dana.
Hi, Dana Nichols, City of Bandon. I represent this small city, and I'm also on the Rapid Response Subcommittee, and I am also going to go down the line and go with Rob next.
Hi, I'm Rob Ehrfeld. I'm the Transportation Planning Manager for the City of Eugene and the city's Public Works Department, and I represent the League of Oregon Cities on this committee. And then I also bring a perspective as I also represent the League of Oregon Cities on ODOT's Public Transportation and Advisory Committee. And then next, I'll hand it over to Lawton.
Hi, I'm Lonnie Radke with Marion County. I'm the county engineer. I'm also representing AOC, the Association of Oregon Counties. And this is just my second meeting, I think, so I'm new to the committee. I'm going to hand it over to Eric. Did I take someone's spot? I thought I heard my name, but maybe I jumped in.
You're
So
doing
I meant to say Lawton, but I must not have enunciated very well.
You know,
so
I thought I heard my name, and then I looked up and thought, did I take Lawton's spot? I'm sorry.
Let's see.
I was really excited to introduce myself.
I don't see Eric on the list.
Then maybe we should
Very
hear
bottom.
from Lawton, since that's who was supposed to talk.
Is Lawton on?
Lawton,
I don't see Lawton on our list either.
Lawton's on the list, but you mean in terms of signing in yet?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking
Okay.
at the participant list.
Okay.
So Scott?
Scott's unable to attend
Scott's
today.
unable to attend today.
Steve?
Perfect.
Hi, I'm Steve Dickey. I'm the Director of Technology and Program Management for Salem Area Mass Transit District, representing transit on this committee. I also represent larger transit systems for the Public Transit Advisory Committee. And I'll pass it on to Luis.
Oh, Luis here, Oregon Transportation Safety Committee. And I want to introduce Troy Costales. I saw him pop up.
Good afternoon.
Did we get all of the committee members?
No, I don't think we've heard from Lauren or Noel or Zhao.
Danny.
So let's start with Lauren and Danny. Thank you. Lauren.
Okay, hi, I'm Lauren Morris. I'm with the Coquitlam Indian Tribe, and I first would like to apologize. That was me that had all that feedback, having a little technical difficulty with the internet. So yeah, I believe this is only my second meeting as well, and I'm happy to be here and just looking forward to figuring all this out. And then I guess I would go to Noel. Or whoever's
Hi.
next on your list.
Yeah, I can go. Hi, Noelle Nickelberry. I work at Metro and I represent the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and we're the MPO for the Portland region. And I'll pass it to Zhao.
Hi, everyone. My name is Zhao. I bring the Safe Routes Practitioner perspective and the large city perspective. Did I already say I'm based out of Portland with Portland Bureau of Transportation? Thanks. Is that everybody? Has Danny already gone? Is Danny here?
I have not.
Okay, great. Pass to you, Danny.
Hi, I'm Danny Schulte. I'm the transportation planner for the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation in Northeastern Oregon. And I'm here representing the tribe. Yeah, happy to be here.
And I think Eric is the only person that I think he's on, maybe on the phone, who hasn't gone yet. I saw his name in the.
Oh, okay. I thought that was what
participant
came up
list.
earlier. I didn't mean to ignore you, Eric. You should introduce yourself.
Oh no, you were totally fine. I was just I think he's the last person who hasn't been introduced as participating.
Hey everybody, good morning. My name is Eric. I am the small rural community and equity representative for the committee, and I'm happy to be here. Sorry if I missed the lead in on what I was supposed to say. I just joined the call. I was dealing with a call right before this. I apologize for being late.
Welcome. No worries. I am desperately trying to get Tracy into the meeting and I don't know how to do it. So I'm going to pause on that for a moment and we're going to keep going on this agenda and Tracy can, we'll figure out Tracy in a minute. But no one else had a hard time logging on. Like all your links seem to work. So I think it's just a one-off issue. Welcome everybody. I guess we should take a second to do ODOT staff. My name is Leanne Ferguson. I'm the Safe Routes to School Construction Program Manager. Let's do Heidi next and then Tammy.
Hi everyone, I'm Heidi Manlove. I'm Leanne's partner on the education side, and I work out of the Transportation Safety Division.
Tammy next.
Hello everyone, I'm Tammy Weil. I work on the back end doing administrative work for Safe Routes to School, helping Leanne out.
Susan, then Alan.
Hi guys, Susan Peitzman. I work in the Public Transportation Division as the Strategic Investments Manager. So my work involves a lot of policy and money.
Hi everyone, I'm Alan Thompson. I'm the Trails Program Manager, and it complements to some extent Jessica's program.
And Hannah DeCapella is also on the call. I'm going to let Hannah introduce herself too, because today she's our impromptu note taker and part of our technical advisory provider team.
Hey folks, I'm Hannah DeCapella, and I think Leanne introduced me pretty well. I'm with also planning and design.
Thank you. All right, so everyone who's had technical difficulties today, welcome to Thursday. This is how it's going today. I'm going to pass it over to Chris to go through the rest of the agenda.
Great.
We'll start our meat of the meeting.
Okay, thank you. My name is Chris Wachi. I am also serving with the technical advisory team, or the technical assistance team. And I'm on the ALTA group, and I have the pleasure of serving as facilitator for the committee. Here's a quick overview of how we're going to spend the next few hours together. We have some SREC business, 2 points, and these are the 2 points that we're going to ask for the committee to give their approval to, or if they have any comments to weigh in on this for these particular issues, for the meeting minutes from January 21st, and then also the rapid response subcommittee new members. And Dana, I think Dana is going to give a little overview of that before the committee gives thumbs up or through our consensus process. We have a period for public comment. So if anyone does want to make a public comment, please indicate. Leanne's monitoring the chat box for that. We have the pleasure of hearing from Troy Costalis from the Transportation Safety Division and his perspective over his Safe Routes to School and his time with ODOT. And then we're going to dive into the discussion on the Safe Routes to School education program grants. And this is really to begin the conversation, to tee up the framework to help Heidi look at funding splits, as well as beginning the discussion about the priorities and scoring matrix. But in doing so, we're going to be looking at the opportunities and some of the challenges for the committee to discuss. So this is really an opportunity to really weigh in on considerations before May, when some of those decisions will need to be made. We'll take a break, and during this period, there's going to be a breakout session, so we have a little more time to dive into some more creative thinking. We'll take a break after that, come back, do a quick debrief, and then we're going to move into guiding principles discussion that the volunteers from the subcommittee have had a lot of thoughtful deliberation on this. So today's going to be a discussion about some of the proposed edits, and also reviewing the SREC input on those proposed edits and revisions to the guiding principles. And then Leanne and Heidi will take us home and just highlight some of the next steps as we move forward. So next slide, please. Oh, And I did want to ask when we're not presenting, if folks wouldn't mind, if it's possible, to please keep their cameras on when we're not doing a presentation, just so we can have some semblance of being together. And I don't know about you, but I miss meeting refreshments. And there's always flowers. So it's meeting refreshments and flowers. All right, next slide, please. So just a reminder how the committee generally deliberates and then provides a decision or a recommendation is using a model of I fully support, supportive of the decision or choice. I may not be fully supportive, but I can live with it. I oppose it, and I need more discussion. So our first, if you can go to the next slide, please, or sorry, stay here, Leanne, is the January 21st meeting minutes. And if we can stop screen sharing just for a moment. And if committee members could please turn on their cameras. Could we hear from folks if there's any edits to the minutes, or are they ready to be approved by the committee? Any comments or edits to the minutes? Not seeing any. So with that, may I see if the minutes are approved? I'm just going through my, and Noel, I see part of your, thank you. All right, not seeing any. That's great. And Danny, is your thumb up?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then I just wanted to check in, Eric, there you are. Okay, thank you very much. So those minutes are approved. And if we could go back to screen sharing, please, Leanne.
Yes. And Dana, the next slide is yours. So if you want to do the introduction for our recommendation for adding 2 new members for the subcommittee, or rapid response subcommittee, that'd be great.
Sure. So with John Vile leaving, we had a vacancy, and we discussed on the subcommittee just who could possibly fill that void, because he had so much knowledge about engineering and just technical aspects of it, of the work that we're looking at. So Leanne had also looked up the rules, right? And it said we could have up to 4 members. So we decided instead of just filling 1 position to request filling 2 positions with Lonnie and Eric. So that would fill in our sort of gaps in knowledge between Lawton and I. So I think then do you move to a vote? Okay, perfect.
Great. Yeah. And I'm sorry to do this to you, Leanne, but if we could stop.
I'm getting better at it.
Yeah, that's it. For being agile. So the question for the 2 new subcommittee members for the rapid response program. Does the meeting approve? Everyone's got thumbs up, thumbs up. Great. And for folks I can't see, Lonnie, I can't see your thumb. All right. Thank you very much. And I say congratulations to the 2 new members, and that's wonderful.
Yay, yeah, and thank you all for being part of that subcommittee. It's one of my favorite parts of the Safe Routes Advisory Committee. So thanks for joining us, Eric.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
And Lawton for being a part of it for so long. All right,
So
go ahead.
Mm-hmm. I was just we're moving into public comment, and do we have anyone who would like to make a public comment?
I haven't seen anybody in the chat. So I think we're okay there.
Okay, great. And so for anyone on the phone, if you're dialing in and you would like to make a public comment, you can dial *9, and that will notify ODOT staff. It's essentially how you raise your hands. So we can just take just a few seconds here to see if anyone is going to do that. And Tammy, I'm going to have to rely on you to let us know.
Haven't seen any. I think we're good to move on. Although if you are trying desperately to submit public comment and can't do it, but get a chance to at some point, we can come back to this. But I think we're okay.
Good. Excellent. So now we'd like to turn it to Heidi to provide an introduction to Troy Costales.
Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce Troy. He's the administrator for my division, the Transportation Safety Division. And we invited him to be a guest speaker for a few minutes for two reasons. One is we're taking a deep dive into the education side of the program, which he oversees. And so he's going to give us a little brief introduction about the history of safe routes to school in Oregon and how it's continued through the years. And so just to give you a little information about him, we also invited him to come specifically at this time because he is retiring May 1st from ODOT. And he's been the administrator for TSD as well as the Governor Highway Safety Representative for Oregon since 1997. And he's had 33 years of service for the state. Troy has worn numerous hats at ODOT. So many, his hat closet is full. He has one more hat coming, that's his retirement hat. Some examples of the hats he's worn, he's served as interim administrators for the Public Transit Division, Motor Carrier Division, and DMV. He's also served as internal and external committee members and different boards, such as the Governor Highway Safety Association, GHSA, and AASHTO, American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials. He's also been the recipient of several ODOT, USDOT, GHSA, and Governor's Excellence Awards. So we just wanted to invite him to come and speak on behalf of TSD and his work in bringing safe routes to school as a statewide program to Oregon. So I will let Troy come on.
Thank you, Heidi, and good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate the invitation, and thank you, Heidi, for the summary. Now I've got to live up to everything you just said for the next 6 weeks or so. I'd like to cover three things with you, and I'll make sure to stay within my 10 minutes. A little bit of history, a little bit about what the Safe Routes to School Advisory Committee has done and the impacts to ODOT and the programs that we run, and then looking ahead, what do I see as some potential opportunities for everybody to look forward to as being part of the Safe Routes to School program. In Oregon, the Safe Routes to School program came into being from phone call. Scott Bricker with the Bicycle Transportation Alliance at the time reached out to me because there was pending federal legislation that was going to set up some federal dollars that were earmarked towards a program called Safe Routes to School. He reached out for two reasons. One, he was hoping that the legislation could be put in place so that the Safe Routes to School program would head to the safety division and not to ODOT generally, because there was a fear amongst some of the early participants in the program about the money being programmed in a way that wouldn't really actually help the schools and to help the families and children that are in and around and their mobility to and from the school. The second was that in the safety program, we operate on an annual pattern and annual plan that we have the ability to, the speed of choice, the speed of decision making is quicker because of our annual plan compared to the construction program, the STIP, which is typically on a 3 to 5 year type cycle. And so BTA sponsored legislation, went forward, and the legislature adopted it, and that then started the formal delegation of Safe Routes to School and created the inaugural Safe Routes to School Advisory Committee. And what in that first committee, the funding that was available was had an interesting twist to it. So if it was $100, just to use this as an example, that came to Oregon, the choice was that on the infrastructure side, that anywhere from 70 to 90 of those $100 could be used for infrastructure, which then meant for the education encouragement side of things that there could be anywhere between $10 and $30. The blend, the bottom line is you would equal your 100 that you were allocated. Well, it was interesting to watch as the committee got together and talked about what that flexibility was, because the original estimate was that 90 was going to go towards infrastructure, because that was where the important part was. But it was an interesting moment to watch as the group talked with one another, and they ended up realizing that infrastructure is extremely important. It's long lasting. It makes huge difference for communities and for schools. But there's only so many of them that we can do because the money isn't going to be able to cover all of the needs. And the recognition that flexing funds into that education and encouragement side allowed us to reach parts of the state that aren't going to be served by an infrastructure project. In fact, some parts of our state will never have an infrastructure project just because of the nature of the area and the geography and topography where they are. So the group had their eyes opened and started talking about the fact that we need to flex 30 and make sure that we do use that education program in a way to get to all of the state so that we reach as many families in this program as best as we can. And that choice has had impacts in relationship to ODOT. This is a program where health and transportation meet on equal terms and meet on equal importance. We can talk about it in various ways, but you all have the ability to make it real and make this happen for communities, for schools, and for families and for individuals. You've had the ability over the years and have the ability coming into the future to provide support for the local spark plugs, those champions that you find. Many of you on this call are some of those champions that make this happen because the outcome is for the community. The impact is more than just for the current set of classmates that are in that school. This is a lifelong learning moment, and you have had that impact on ODOT. And as the conversation around safe routes has shown that it can be done, that we can't have a health transportation conversation. We can have a community-based conversation. It has impacted the way other programs and projects that are involved, particularly in the infrastructure side, have had conversations. What's been looked at in relationship to scoring? What's been expected in some of the project development at the community level? These are long-lasting changes that do make a difference and have made a difference over the past decade. For those of you that are new to the committee, you are walking into a wonderful set of teammates. A bunch of the passion, the purpose that they bring. You have great folks that are related in the ODOT side of things to help you. You have great liaisons that are around you. With Luis and the Oregon Transportation Safety Committee, you've got governor-appointed body that is cheering and supporting all the way along the way for safe routes to school. So I want to thank you for your passion and your purpose, pushing forward on that momentum and recognizing that this is about all modes, all people, all communities, everybody being all in. That's what you get a chance to do when sitting around the table and talking about safe routes. And as more governmental bodies recognize the link between health and transportation, you are the model. So be that model. Exhibit what's going on. Share those successes and continue to push on my agency, Department of Transportation, the agencies that you represent, city, county, nonprofit. Continue to push on that so that it creates moments of discomfort. It creates moments of discovery and for change. Because we don't know all the answers. They lie out in front of us somewhere. It's part of that exploration that we all get to go through in having those tough conversations. Because as we blend program funding and authority together, it's messy. It's not easy. And so appreciate the fact that all of you, with your passion and your drive, have grace to all the staff that are involved that need to set things up, that need to be able to put the foundation together so that as we move forward, we know we are on solid footing. But pressure to decision makers to be open-minded, to be willing to be trained and educated is something that is a constant drumbeat that I'd ask you all to do toward the future. because as we lean on the shoulders of people that have been before us in order to do the work in front of us, we're creating the stepping stones for the people that come after us in order to continue to push forward. And don't let up. Keep going. The communities are counting on you. The children in our communities are counting on you, counting on all of us. And it's been great to be part of the program from the very inception. And I know that the program that we have today is in your hands and in great hands, because we do make a difference day in and day out by implementing the various aspects of Safe Routes to School. So with that, Heidi, there's my short little piece. Hopefully I hit what it is that you would like, and be happy to answer any questions. But I also know you have a very aggressive agenda with lots of great things going on today. And I just want to say thank you, because you and your predecessors have really made Safe Routes to School work. Oregon's known as one of those places that we're continuing to move forward, even though federal funding that's earmarked for the program doesn't exist. Our legislature stepped up and added money to it because you exist and that you make a difference. So I'll put myself on mute, happy to answer any questions.
So on our agenda, we have about 5 minutes for questions.
Troy's been around since the beginning, so any like historical questions, I feel like I mean, I'm sure Troy will be fine if we call him up after he's retired. He probably won't love it, but anything that folks want to know about the history right now is a good time. Rob.
Sure, I have a question for Troy. That's okay. Do you want to just put yeah, thanks. So Troy, I mean, first of all, thank you for what you said and for all your service. And, I really appreciate everything you've done for our state. Obviously, Safe Routes to School doesn't exist in a vacuum, and you're the head of our safety division for ODOT. And there's all these other programs there, like the pedestrian safety that I think Heidi also works on, but DUII, seatbelt, child safety seats, et cetera, et cetera. And one thing I'm curious about is, I mean, unfortunately, we haven't really bent the curve down on fatalities in our state. And there's probably a lot of reasons for that, including just things out of our control. And we know there's a lot of good work that happens on the infrastructure side in Oregon, both in terms of Safe Routes to School, the all roads transportation safety, and other things. What I'm wondering is, do you think that making your division bigger or giving it more budget, would that help? Like, would making these programs, would they be more impactful if they all had their budget doubled? That's what I'm wondering. Like, would that help us to bend the curve and so that we can reach more people with a lot of the different educational things that you all do?
Thanks, Rob. Great question. Great observation. We have bent the curve before. You go back about 7 or 8 years. We had one of the largest declines percentage-wise, as well as the number of reduction in fatalities on our roads of any state in the country. And we're not a very big state when it comes to population compared to others. So we've done it. And you're also right in indicating, and just as I say these words, but it's over 90% of the time when there's some sort of incident where somebody is injured, it's the human behavior piece, an element of it. So how do we continue to get where the behavior and the habits of people that are using the transportation system in whatever mode they choose, in whatever way they choose to do it, that they understand that there are rules of engagement and rules to follow, because that's what keeps everybody safe, keeps everybody from being in the same place at the same time. And an element of that is traffic enforcement. An element of that is education, outreach, and encouragement, and having a transportation system that is self-monitoring, self-educating, and self-enforcing. I think in the infrastructure side, there are parts, and you as a group really have, I think we're on the tip of the spear of this, because the projects you put in and around the school systems help people understand how to use them and use them correctly, so that they don't end up in a spot of risk. If from a budget point of view, I think everybody can raise their hand and say, yeah, there's the ability for more budget. There's more outreach that would be able to be done. I think training and education and having people understand personally and professionally that they own part of the responsibility in keeping ourselves and each other safe. It's just hard. It's not an easy thing to do. And sometimes it's literally, if we go back to that point in time where county fairs and events are going on, it's talking to that person face to face, eye to eye, about helping them understand why they put the car seat in the way they do, and why they look both ways when they get ready to cross the street, even though the light may be green for them. The push towards that education, and I applaud the Safe Route School Advisory Committee and leaning into that and doing that work today, because that's the 90+% piece that we've got to make a dent in. So hopefully I answered your question, Rob. Appreciate it. And appreciate your leadership of this group as well. Thanks for stepping in as chair.
Thank you. Any other questions for Troy? So do you have a calendar on your wall that has X's on it yet, Troy?
Not yet. Even though there's a date out there, in some ways it hasn't necessarily always sunk in. But it's gonna get here quick. But I again want to let all of you say to you, thank you for what you do, because you are the energy and the passion of a program that is a model for a lot of other areas. And so keep it up.
Thank you. There, energy and passion is a good way to segue to Heidi Manlove's next segment on the agenda. Heidi, your video might go viral. It was really enjoyable, really well done. I'm thinking the People Choice Awards. I don't know, there might be a statue in your future. But this is the deep dive now to start talking about the Safe Routes to School education challenges and opportunities. And there's a lot of insight that has been collected, and Heidi's distilled that into some themes, but we'll have an opportunity to add to that. So Heidi.
Hi, everyone. I'm clicking mute, and for some reason my mouse isn't doing what it needs to do. Thank you, Chris, for mentioning the video. I hope everyone got to see it. We listed it as your homework. Mainly, I sat down and we're talking about making a presentation for you guys, and everything that I wanted to tell you just I felt wouldn't cut it in just some slides. And so I thought giving you a little bit more meat to what I do can help to kind of frame our next conversations over the next couple of months. And so if you haven't had a chance to see the video, I encourage you to do so. It'll give you a little more depth to what are the types of things that we do and what could we possibly do more or better of or change up. So I look to you all to help guide those decisions for me and to help give me some insight. So today is just a kind of a high level overview of the funding and kind of how it's split, and then we'll go into a little more depth into the next 2 months. So next slide, please. So just a review of the summary of this, and this slide is slightly different from what you had seen before. So the italics, I think Chris said, are the pieces that have changed a little bit just as we've started going through this year, realizing that we needed some changes to get us in preparation for both Leanne and I to move forward into our next funding cycle. But specifically for the education side, looking at what we say today and the kind of information we gather from you today will help me to guide what I present to you next meeting in May. And so next meeting in May, I'm going to propose to you the program structure and splits as I see it best going forward, and have some kind of broader discussion more in depth about that, and also ask you for those priorities of the funding and cycle. And so what those priorities will do is move us into giving me information to how to build my scoring matrix for the next round of funding, which so the July meeting would be you guys would be giving your recommendation on the program structure splits to the TSD administrator and OTSC. And then also in July, you would be giving me some insight to my draft of the scoring matrix for what we will use in the next round of funding. So we have a next couple of months to really dive deep into this. So next slide. So just in summary, like I mentioned, we're focusing on diving deep into education and thinking about what our successes have been, but also what our challenges and barriers are. And we'll review our current fundings and then also discuss a recommendation of the funding splits. So next slide. So just reminder, May, we will talk a little more about the proposed funding splits, and you'll help me with developing priorities for my matrix. And then finally, July will be where you would actually do the decision for me to recommend for me to present to Troy, the TSD administrator. But he won't be here, but he might be, or I don't know. So whoever the administrator, the acting administrator is at this time. So, and then we'll work on the scoring matrix. So next slide. Okay, so in thinking about the current funding and how it's split up, just as this is a summary of what you guys mostly know, but I'll get a little more detail. I'm going to still keep it high level just because that'll lead us into a deeper conversation next meeting. But right now, the current split of the funds is 60-40. So this is what Troy was talking about, using $100. And right now, my funding is at $1 million for the Safe Routes to School program a year. And so that $1 million is split up currently based on 600,000 of that going toward local competitive grant projects, and then 400,000 of that going to statewide services. So the local competitive grant process is a 3-year grant that's usually hiring coordinators and paying for activities like education and encouragement activities and bicycle and pedestrian safety education. And then the 40%, you kind of got a review of that in my video of the different services, like what Troy was saying, that we provide for the rest of the state, whether they have ODOT funding or not, that they can utilize for any kind of bicycle and pedestrian safety or safe routes to school programming. So this is our technical assistance team funding goes towards that, building any kind of publications, media campaigns, running our Jumpstart program, our walk and roll program, and then it also pays for me to work at ODOT. So this is all part of that funding splits that we'll be going into in the next couple of months. So next slide.
Leanne, before we jump forward, just may I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Just for clarity, it pays for your position, but how much of your position is actually dedicated to Safe Routes to School?
So my FTE is approximately 0.75 for Safe Routes to School. So this is part of my the other portion of my work goes towards the pedestrian and bicycle safety program. And that's paid through more of NHTSA funding and not federal highway funding. So the federal highway funding is what we use for Safe Routes to School. Okay. So, so this is just a review of our competitive grant program. So we're in our most recent current funding cycle that started October 1 of 2020, so federal fiscal year, through September 30th of 2022. So we funded 11 grantees. We had 28 applicants, so we were only able to fund 40% of the applicants that applied. And we are funding a little less than half of what was requested. I think it was like 4.4 million that was requested. So this is to say we had quite a bit of money to extend out for these competitive grants due to an increase in funding that started in 2019, but it still isn't enough for the need of safe routes to school education programming. Next slide. And then this is just, again, a summary of the statewide services, just to kind of give you an idea of all the different things that are involved in that 40%. So the bicycle safety training, funding our website, OregonSafeRoutes.org, walk and roll incentive program, technical assistance, and all sorts of work that goes in the back end to create any kind of resources to folks who are funded or not funded through ODOT. Next slide. So in thinking about our current program challenges, since I've started working in this position for about 3 years, I've had a chance to see the end, the half end of one cycle, grant funding cycle, and then start a new funding cycle. And so I've had a chance to kind of work in both cycles to kind of get an idea of what are our challenges, what are some of the things that I can do or that we can do as a state to improve the program, to expand our services, expand our programming, but also do it in a way that is not a waste of funding. And so in thinking about this, I've come to the conclusion that I have one competitive call out, right, every 3 years for a growing program that's trying to meet diverse needs. And so it's very difficult at a statewide level to have one program that suffices every need, right? And so we have such a diverse needs around the state in terms of how far advanced programs are. Some are just beginning. Some don't have any safe routes to school programming in their area. Some had some a long time ago, but the funding went away, so they don't have it anymore. Some have been able to be lucky enough to continuously have funding and continuously have coordinators. And so we have a big diverse of where people are in terms of their safe routes to school programming, as well as just diverse geographic needs of urban versus rural, whether people are in an MPO or not. And so lots of diversity, right? And so for me, I feel like this competitive program does a good job at opening it up to anyone that wants to apply. But there are some problems with that, right? Some challenges, and some of those challenges are that new grantees have a difficult time planning for such a large project and even just applying. And so in my mind, I feel like we need to do a better job at helping folks get more assistance in that planning and have them be a little more grant ready when they're ready to start this grant. And so given that, even if they don't get a grant because for whatever reason they weren't funded, 3 years is a long time to wait for them to get just that assistance to even get them going. And so next slide. So in thinking about these challenges, I started thinking, okay, so yes, we have diversity and we need to maybe try to work on how we support this diverse points within the state. But then I started thinking like, okay, the people that like school districts who we are really encouraging to be a part of this and buy into it, those are the folks who tend to have the biggest barriers to A, applying, and then B, getting off the ground and running. And so in thinking about schools buying into this, it's great that superintendents and folks within the schools have decided to take this on and apply, but once they get the grant, it's very difficult for them to even figure out how to make it happen. And so in thinking about this, how can we set them up to be grant ready? How can we set them up to prepare them to be ready to go off and start their program as planned, just like some of the other programs who have been running for a while? And so I'm thinking maybe schools may benefit from smaller, more obtainable projects, things that they can kind of do slow baby steps or some kind of phasing. And so we need more outreach and engagement to be able to do this for folks. And so some of the challenges too are that we know so coordinators are fundamental to a Safe Routes to School program being successful. The best Safe Routes to School education programs have somebody there that's paid to be that coordinator, to make those engagements happen, to do that networking, to invite all the folks to the table to be a part of this, and do some sustainable networking and planning, let alone just bike rodeos and all sorts of other things. So someone needs to be a coordinator to do that. So how do we get that to communities when they don't have funding, when they don't have a place to house that coordinator? And so these are the things that are challenges for me to think about with our program. And then again, even if we were to increase our funding for the program, I am a one woman shop here in the Transportation Safety Division. So my staff time is limited in terms of how much I can really support just myself. So these are challenges in terms of thinking of how to meet this need. Next slide. So did we skip a slide? No. Okay. So so those are the challenges for the competitive process, and these are our statewide challenges now. So this is the right now the current 40% bucket. And so given all of that need, I guess you could probably imagine this growing into some of this overfilling into the statewide services needs, right? And so we need to build up some more statewide resources to make them ready to be available for folks who don't have funding but want to do start funding or want to start a program or want to kind of build bicycle and pedestrian safety education in schools. So an example of this is building off of this Neighborhood Navigators that we just completed this last year, 2.0. So this is the second version, and thinking about how many different types of demographics and folks need to be educated by lessons. And so we tried to make a statewide available resource, but we also know that, you know, with equity in mind and thinking about different demographics, that maybe different education lessons are needed. How many different languages are these education lessons needed? Thinking about how many schools really want bike fleets but can't afford it. People really want to learn bicycle and pedestrian safety and have that there for their kids, but there's really no trainers, or they can't afford that someone to come in and educate their schools for that, or their teachers. So just thinking about all these different things and putting this all into a bigger engagement and outreach programming piece to provide all these things. So suffice it to say, all of this stuff is coming into this idea that we need more support for technical assistance to be able to provide these things for folks. Next slide. So in presenting to you the two sets of challenges there for the program, how do we overcome it? And so I'm going to offer a few opportunities today for both sides, although you really weigh in on mostly the competitive program side. And so we'll focus a little more on that in the next 2 months, but you will see that some of the things that we could be doing in the statewide side could help with us thinking about how we allocate competitive program funds. So some ideas or opportunities would be to create different funding streams that are competitive funding streams, but make it so that certain folks may want to apply to one stream over another for whatever reason. So this could be example of starting smaller grants for people who are just beginning. And so this could be like a coordination grant or a planning assistance grant. So it would still be competitive, but something like working project identification in with Leanne's project identification program. And so this is a way to kind of bring both of our programs together and help a community who where we want to encourage both education and and construction. And so also still maybe having three-year local competitive grants for people who are ready for that. People who are have been doing safe routes and just need that extra funding to get moving further into something else or expanding further. And then also too, using some funds to fund small projects through our technical assistant hubs that I'll be talking about in a moment. So that gives you a little bit of different tiered approach of making funds available at more equitably to compete for. These types of opportunities do exist to maybe bridge that gap that we see of trying to get all levels to compete for one specific type of a 3-year long-term program. Okay, next slide. And so in thinking about our opportunities for the competitive program, this is where we're working on this hub model with our technical assistance team, where we would essentially be offering technical assistance through hubs and eventually be at least in, have one in every ODOT region per se. I mean, we're not really sure how we would do that yet, but right now we're working on at least 3 hubs so that they can deliver regional expertise and guidance to folks within a region. And so they can offer some more one-on-one outreach and engagement, offer a bike fleet loaner programs, start working on building education programs and encouragement programs, and maybe offering those mini grants for things like walking school buses or something. So this is a way to kind of take that work off of ODOT staff's plate and kind of putting it more of on the ground at a regional level to help the folks that are needing these things. Next slide. So I'll let Chris take from here, but I just want to lead by saying we are welcoming any ideas or suggestions that you have going forward, and the more you give to me today, the better I'll be prepared to present how some steps of proposal of how to move forward for the next meeting.
So I kind of want to share what our breakout group questions are going to be, so that we're like right in time to go to the breakout session, but I almost think it might be good to leave a couple seconds to ask Heidi a couple of questions. Is that okay, Chris? Okay, so am I sharing my screen? See the questions. Okay, so our next step is to break out into groups, again, 4 breakout groups. Each will have a person who has these questions, as well as will be taking notes. And it'll be about a 20-minute time where you can work with a small group. And the questions that we want you to be thinking about and talking about in your small group is what considerations should be kept in mind for the proposed opportunities for the competitive program and the statewide services. So what are we missing? Are there other opportunities that we haven't even considered yet? And what are your initial thoughts for Safe Routes to School, the next grant cycle for education program funding priorities? So this kind of feedback will help us now come back to you next month with a better proposal that includes your feedback on what our next steps should be with the education program. So I'll pause for a second and see if there are any immediate questions for Heidi about her presentation before we hop into the breakout rooms.
Hey, Leanne, I have a question. Are we able to get those slides to look at like while we're in the breakout groups? That would really help me like process.
Yes, let me double check. I sent them to the web guy to post them. I'm gonna double check that up, and then I will put a link in the chat. And while I'm doing that, if anyone else has any questions.
Great. I was wondering how our last allegation, how those programs are moving forward and what they're looking at, because it sounds like in particular, people had a hard time getting started. Like whether they get this 3 years, but maybe it takes them, a half a year to actually get somebody in that position. And I was just, how did it go last year? I'm sensing that there were some flaws. I just wanted you to touch on them.
Yeah.
And if I could just chime in and say very quickly, because we really want to get to our breakout rooms. So
Yeah, and I would just say I'll probably go a little more into detail with the next meeting to kind of set that up. But I will say COVID-19 highly impacted the first year for these folks. So it's really hard to say, you know, in terms of like, if it wasn't COVID, would they still have these issues? I would say that for the ones who, the new grantees, I will say they struggle whether COVID or not. And so the new grantees struggle to kind of pull that together and get it going. That's why we've, you know, they're 3-year grants, because it's not until the 3rd year that they're really got things going, and they're got a lot of programming going. Up until then, a lot of the new grantees are just spending that first year getting someone hired, getting their feet wet, doing the trainings. And so yeah, I can see that in the last cycle as well as this cycle, even if COVID didn't happen. So I hope that kind of helps to illustrate it a little bit.
And I think, Noelle, your question that you just put in the chat box is an example of what we're hoping to get in the breakout rooms. If it's an idea that if it's still a 3-year cycle, or could it be a shorter time period, might be what we want to dive into and provide that opportunity to chat. So may we get into those breakout rooms?
Yeah, so everybody check your emails for the PDF of the PowerPoint presentation. This technical difficulties have been abounding this week, so the materials haven't been posted on the SRAC site yet, so I don't have a link for you, but I emailed you the PDF of the PowerPoint. And Tammy, can you go ahead and send us into those rooms?
And
hey, we made it.
Hello.
Hey, everyone.
I have the questions to my left, which I'm happy to share my screen again so that you can look at those questions more, or put them in the chat if that's the easier way to take a look at them. Does anyone have a preference?
Chat.
Chat. Ugh.
Just so we can see each other, like, because otherwise that would just be taking up the screen. So
Yeah, agree. Okay, let's see. Chat. Everyone. All right, they're going in the chat. And all right. So I'm also happy to answer other questions as best as I can. I'm probably this deep in the education program as well as Heidi, so I can answer some things. But let's start with the first question. What consideration should be kept in mind for the proposed opportunities around the competitive program and around the statewide services program? And the competitive program was again that grant program, the 3-year grant program where you can provide up to, I think it was $100,000 a year to a community to hire a coordinator and to implement to plan and then implement a bunch of work in a 3-year period.
So the first thing that comes to mind for me is the level of technology. I know that oftentimes it might just be as simple as a school district not having an extra license for Adobe or something like that, that would be crucial for putting together the information to be able to submit that application for the grant. Like everybody has computers, obviously. I don't mean that.
Yeah, and I threw that question into the chat before we left about this the idea Heidi presented of smaller grants, and wondering about if they could be on a different timeline than 3 full years. I feel like a big priority is getting school districts to be applying and not just jurisdictions, especially for the education delivery. And I know getting that big grant application together and then having to have it for 3 years. Like if there's some way to allow applying for 1 year and then you can somehow access the next year or something like that, that kind of gives them an opportunity to build the program instead of just sort of jumping in and then not quite having, I don't know, it just seems like there's some more checkpoints you could have and support you could provide. I'll stop there. I have a lot of thoughts, but I don't want to.
Yeah, that's a great one.
I remember being in some schools when I was a kid that had like a classroom that had been used for like, I think it was called home economics, where they would teach, I don't know if this was in like the 50s and 60s, where they would teach kids cooking and life skills. But, and unfortunately, you know, it's kind of sad that that sort of went away, but I kind of feel like ideally, like this would just, Safe Routes to School would just be part of like being a kid, like learning. I mean, maybe in an ideal world, you should have to be taught it because it's just like part of the culture, but part of it, you know, it should just be institutionalized in the school districts that like, this is just part of what we do and what we learn. And so like I guess that's sort of my vision. And so it's like, how do we get there? And so like, I think like part of it is like capacity building. So I'll just give an example in our area, which is 3 school districts in Eugene and Springfield. I think both our bike safety education and our Safe Routes to School coordinators were all originally funded by ODOT grants, but now we're funded through our NPO and also some private funding. And so we don't, in our recreation programs in both cities, actually run the bike safety education. So we've kind of so I don't think we rely on ODOT anymore. Not to say we want to apply for grants again for education, but you know, for the most part, like we're pretty self-sufficient. And so like, I know that's harder in outside of NPO areas to raise that kind of money, but just thinking about how do we build that capacity, because these 3-year grants are eventually going to go away. And so is that district going to have to, and then there's so much need with just this limited amount of funding. So how do we, you know, I don't know if that's part of what we asked groups to do as part of their 3-year grants is to come up with a plan for how they're going to integrate it once the grant's over. But anyway, those are just some thoughts.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Rob. I feel like it should just be like a part of our education system. And that's something I feel like could be part of the statewide services as well, of just sort of helping make those connections with Oregon Department of Education and districts. And I don't know, I just feel like there's a lot of support from the ODOT program as well as the grants that are given out that could help move that forward.
We have a local advocate who travels to Switzerland. Sometimes he has friends there and he shows me like the test the kids take there on safe walking or something. Like it's just part of their education and they have to take this test to show that they learned it.
Great. Mavis or Sunny, haven't heard from y'all yet. Any thoughts?
I didn't have anything further that hasn't been mentioned already. Thanks for asking.
As an ex-teacher, I am very leery of adding more to the bulk load that gets dumped onto the education system. I think it would be wonderful to have part of that curriculum, maybe in a PE curriculum, something like that. But I personally think that teachers have become a dumping ground, and they need to lighten that load a little bit if we're going to add to it. And then, of course, I live in the middle of nowhere, and I want the middle of nowhere to be able to get these grants because it is highly impactful to everyone. So those are my thoughts, you know, keeping it open so that little towns can apply, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a big grant, but it needs to be enough to like keep somebody's interest and keep things moving. And there you go. There's my thoughts.
Great. Do you have anything else, Eric? You started us off, but then.
Yeah, so to Mavis's point about the, trying to avoid putting more and more work on teachers, maybe encouraging people who we're working with in that short-term time frame to maybe explore how to create standing materials that students can just access, whether it's a website or if it's like a brochure, or if it's like maybe, I know that we had seen some comics that you all showed us at the last meeting, maybe expand kind of that work, because that takes it off of the teachers. Then it's just, you're giving out these comic books that kind of explain bicycle safety.
Yeah. I feel like there's a way to do it without, because I agree. I don't think we want to dump more on teachers' plates for sure. I appreciate that perspective too. And I was thinking more along the lines of like the district hiring a coordinator versus like a city doing that and then hoping that the district will let them in. We've seen that success at Beaverton School District here in the metro region is the only district in our region that has a coordinator in the school, and she was able to get the school board to adopt a policy that requires pet safety for all elementary school students. She's the one delivering it, but having that come from the district, and it made a huge difference. Other cities have been trying to do that for years, and having that person in the district, I feel like just made such a big difference. And that they could be supporting the teachers instead of making it feel like an extra thing.
Great.
Am I correct in that part of the who we give money to is linked to where they are? I mean, the schools basically have to be on board to receive a grant, more or less. Correct?
Right. That's the way it's set up right now. It's like kind of that's the only option. That's the only thing you can sign up for, or that's the only way you could receive funding. Specifically is through like this 3-year grant program right now.
Yeah.
But the schools don't have to sign off and say, we will welcome this program into our school.
I don't remember if there was a support letter required or not. I would assume there was. Like I think it would have stood out to me but I mean, a support letter is different than actually.
Yeah.
A lot of times there's an easy way to. I'm going to move us on to the next question, but we can come back to this one if we get a slow on conversation. But and we're kind of there. But are there any other opportunities that Heidi did not talk about in her presentation that you're thinking about?
Yeah.
Or we can even bounce to the third one because I think we only have about 5 minutes left. Do you have any initial thoughts for the next round of education grants as what we should be prioritizing?
Well, I do like the idea of having a two separate competitive programs. I think, again, to Mavis's point about getting the programs into more communities, that having a sort of different stream for new programs could help do that potentially, and potentially having a different time frame associated with it. I'm not sure what would be the right approach there of like, I also think there could be an opportunity to tie some technical assistance support to those new programs as well, saying not only if you get this new grant to kick off a new program, you'll also have some dedicated time from one of our technical assistance providers to make sure that you have what you need or something like that, so that I just feel like there could be some added support, whereas some of the more established programs could go through the 3-year process and just kind of keep programs rolling that are already set up or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Great. Eric, we moved on to the final 2 questions to see if there are any other opportunities that folks have identified based on the challenges that Heidi brought up, or what are your initial thoughts about the next grant funding call out for grants? What should our priorities be?
So from an equity perspective, I think that trying to, when we're doing some of these like exploratory grant programs, that we should be interfacing with some of the local equity voices, for lack of a better term. I mean, like minority coalitions, whether it be like a local Hispanic network or a representative of the tribe or a local representative of the NAACP, things like that.
Great.
Yeah, if there's any like incentives to also like partnerships, I think could go to that point of like making sure that programs are dedicating some funding, and especially I feel like the larger 3-year grants should have sub-recipients, particularly like culturally specific organizations that they are working with, or school-based programming, things like that, that make sure that the program is truly reaching all kids, and also compensating folks for their engagement on it could be another way to incorporate that as well.
You know, I would just say a suggestion. I mean, I think those are good ideas. You know, there could be a school that has already a large minority population. And so I guess like we could have a kind of open-ended question that asks about equity and like more qualitatively. And then it could, you know, it could relate to what Eric raised about working with local coalitions or organizations, but it could also just be like this school has already, you know, we're just by working with these kids, we're reaching you know, a more marginalized community. And so I just think like, let's give people some different options for how they can address equity through their programs.
On that note, I think it would also be great if we could give some preference points to proposals that focus on equity. I don't know if that's appropriate.
Yeah, it's very appropriate. Thank you. That's great. On that note, if anyone has any ideas for how they would like to see that happen, like in the past, we've kind of prioritized low-income schools, Title I schools, but if there are any other ideas for how to measure one school against another or one program against another, I'm very open to hearing any ideas that y'all have.
Is the education grant side as quantitative as the infrastructure side, or is it different?
In this last round, it was kind of quantitative. The one where we asked like how many, what percentage of the students that you're reaching will be at a Title I school, and then scored based.
Okay.
So really focusing in on low-income schools.
Great. Okay.
I would add to something in the scoring around capacity and ability to serve the students. Like to Rob's point, there may be a school that has, you know, a large Spanish-speaking population, but does the program have the capacity to deliver and the skills to deliver a program in English and Spanish? And this is where I was getting to, like, do they need to partner with an organization to provide that education, and just making sure that those things have been thought through by the applicant as far as, yes, the school may be low income and majority students of color, but who is delivering this program, and will it be delivered equitably and effectively for those students, is a way to include that in the application as well.
So when I think about it, I'm thinking it's kind of like the PIP, you know, where it's a pre-infrastructure, but this is like a pre-3-year serious program where you're getting assistance and getting everybody on board, reaching out to the different communities and getting reaching out to the school district, reaching out to different communities, bringing them all in so that you have a network, so that if you were to get that 3 years of funding, that it morphs right into success. You know, so I'm thinking that this is a smaller grant that takes less time, less whatever, that's getting all your little ducks in the row. And I like the ideas of the different districts, like District 5, for example, having somebody that actually deals with safe routes to school, so that there is a touch person here instead of, you know, in Portland, which is, they're all very knowledgeable, but they are across the state.
Great. Anything else? I don't remember exactly when we started this, but it should be about 20 minutes. And I feel like probably up to that 20 minutes, but I don't really know for sure because I don't remember what time we started. So
I think we have 2 minutes left.
Okay. I'll go back through the questions one more time just to see if anybody's brain has any more things to add, but we're looking for considerations that should be kept in mind about opportunities around the competitive program or statewide services, and thoughts for prioritizing the next round of grants. For example, I think we actually prioritized, we know that in a grant, we know that a coordinator plays a big role in getting things moving. So we really prioritized grants that had a coordinator. And I don't know, like that played out like in different ways, because I think some communities already have a coordinator, so they wouldn't need another coordinator. Sometimes just hiring a coordinator is going to take 1.5 years to find the right person to fill that role. So like there were pros and cons to that one. Prioritizing safety as part of these grant applications has been a challenge, and so we've prioritized safety education, like looking to make sure that each grant was providing safety education as a way to prioritize safety. Trying to remember back to when we did this.
Leanne, can I ask a question about I feel like Heidi mentioned in her presentation, increasing the technical assistance funding, or there's a need for that. So is that sort of part of the question too, of like, should more funding go to technical assistance than goes to the competitive grant program?
That's kind of where we're leaning, just because we gave out a bunch of competitive grant funding that some of it didn't go anywhere because people weren't quite prepared yet. We don't think that the people were wrong in applying. We think that we didn't provide them the right kind of structure. So we're thinking of doing some more competitive things as part of the services. So maybe communities could apply for those planning services, like maybe as part of the project identification program, we really beef up the education side of it, and communities can have a consultant come in and help them plan out before they apply for a program. So more competitive services is kind of what we're thinking of, as opposed to just all competitive grants. And even in the grants, we're thinking of 2 different kinds: a longer term, maybe stick with a 3-year grant, but then like a shorter term intro grant or new idea grant or something like that.
I like having a mix of grant types.
Yeah.
And also too, like if people miss the 3 years.
Well, I had the worst time. I had the worst time connecting. I finally got it figured out at 1:30.
That's my story.
I just copied you.
You can't be me.
No, I am definitely technologically challenged. My husband will tell you the same.
Welcome back, everybody. I think
that's 2 of us.
Is Chris back too?
I am.
There she is.
Hi. I think first of all, Tammy, well done. She
nailed it.
Great, smooth. Breakout rooms. Now we have slated that we're going to take a 10-minute break so people can stretch, and then we're going to come back and debrief what our conversations, the 20 minutes, which went really fast, before we go into a really thoughtful discussion around guiding principles. So
can we shorten our break to 8 minutes so that we can come back at 2:45? We're a little bit behind schedule.
You bet. I mean, if that's all right with everyone. So ready, set, go. See you back here in 2:45. Thank you. Tracy, I had an awful technological morning too. So I have really bad internet connections today. So it could be, we have a pretty good storm happening right now. I don't know if that's.
Well, we have had some connectivity issues with our Outlook and Teams, but this was with Zoom, and I had registered. You know how you're supposed to register, and so you're signed up for the rest of the year. Well, I'd done that, but when I click on the link, it goes right back to register. I'm like, well, I already registered. So I'd click on register and it would just stay there. And I finally figured out I had to actually select the meeting I'm trying to join. I thought it'd be intuitive, like it's today, but it wasn't. So it was me.
Hey, Chris, sorry I left the meeting earlier. I clicked the wrong button.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. That's okay. We followed you right after.
Okay. I was like, oh no, wrong button.
Oh no. All right, I will be right back, folks. Advantage of this. Nice to see you, Brian.
Yeah, you too.
Hello.
Hey. I'm like, it's just like old times at our old meetings where it's like, I need a sweet treat. I'm eating peanut butter cups. If you were here with me, you could have some of the
peanut
butter cups.
Yum. I was just having some chocolate covered pretzels.
Yeah.
You know, we were just moving towards healthy snacks right when COVID hit.
Oh yeah, we were moving towards healthy snacks. Veggie trays. There's always so much veggies left over.
Oh, there you
go. Banana split in half with Nutella and peanut butter because I was like trying to split the difference. So I was like,
Yum.
Oh, that's good. Okay, I think everyone's slowly coming back. If you're back and you can turn on our camera, then we'll know you're here and we can launch in. So one suggestion for the committee, as we're doing the debrief, if you have comments or questions, similar to what Noelle did, if you could put into the chat box, that'll help us kind of guide the discussion, because we do have a pretty significant agenda item that we want to get to as well. So we have about 10 minutes to do a quick debrief on our discussion. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to call on the facilitators from the other groups to do an overview. And you want to start us off, Leanne?
Yes, I should have been using this break to like hone in, but I did not. So here we go. We had a really great discussion. We had some good ideas around the competitive program, around making maybe a 3-year grant is too long for some people, making those shorter in time frame, and also making smaller, shorter grants might be more feasible for some people to apply for. We talked about application assistance, whether it's with technology or just getting all the materials ready that you need. Talking about districts, how having the district run the program is great, but having like a paid person at the district running it, that we're not piling more things upon teachers who are already overworked and stressed, and we need to love and appreciate them and how much work we've put on them so far in our society. For statewide services, talking about how do we make the Oregon Department of Education a part of our ultimate goal, so that statewide the Department of Education can also be promoting education within that system. About creating standing materials that like really good standing materials, so that a teacher who did want to cover it might just have a bunch of materials that were already created that they could just hand out, like the comic books, a good website, things like that. Other opportunities are like the idea of the 2 funding streams, having something geared towards new folks seems like a good idea, tying technical assistance to those new programs. A lot about partnerships. We should be helping communities make partnerships with community-based organizations or minority coalitions, so that they're implementing programs to communities in a way that communities can feel supported and heard and understood, and really meet the needs of the community. Incentives around partnerships. And then we talked a little bit about the upcoming education grant cycle. Talked about scoring equity, highly scoring equity, asking people, how are you going to address equity in your program, making sure they've got the right partners at the table, giving preference points to schools based on equity. So that's the overall. Did I miss anything, team? There was some really great conversation. I worked with Noelle, Eric, Rob, Mavis, and Sunny. And I think that was everybody in our group.
Okay, and I would just want to recognize we're going over a lot of ideas and
we'll
input.
also compile all these notes, and Heidi will use them to work on her next. So if we don't say something out loud here, it's not that we won't consider it. We have all of the notes from all these subgroups that we can look to and study.
Susan, would you mind?
Sure. Let me grab my notes real quick. I had Steve, Danny, Luis, Trevor, and Hannah. So a couple key themes. Stephen made the comment about how there's just such a large need, making sure we get the distribution in critical areas, and kind of critical areas being those crash locations and injuries and fatalities, but also kind of addressing the school siting and land use issues that have created barriers, recognizing that that's like an infrastructure conversation, but what is the education side of the locations of those critical areas? So tying more education into the infrastructure piece. Danny had made some really great points about how excellent the PIP was for her community. And so an emphasis on that technical assistance and more of outreach to rural districts to help them know about the PIP and other opportunities. Luis just loved Heidi's video, thought that it was necessary for everyone to see. So I just wanted to put that in there. Really recognizing that the larger projects are more suited for advanced programs, and how can we get more like seed money to communities that are wanting to get something started. We talked a bit about a sponsorship idea instead of a grant program, so small communities can get seed money. Let's see. Then we did discuss the challenge in terms of the need for ongoing funding for operations in communities. And those are kind of, oh, and then we had a discussion on partnership in terms of partnering with other well-established programs such as Mothers Against Drunk Driving and insurance companies and things like that. So there's a lot in there.
Thank you. Heidi.
Yeah, we had some similar themes to what Leanne and Susan was saying. I was with Kim, Lauren, Zhao, and Lonnie, sorry. And they brought up points about really creating a mentor program at the statewide services side to really help boost coordinators who are part of the grants. And so it's a way to kind of help the statewide help the competitive process a little bit. Also too, Zhao talked about weaving in non-traditional grantee collaborations. So having folks who are not a traditional grantee apply with folks that are, and make it more of a collaborative project so that they're not just flying solo trying to get all of those after the fact. And so that could help to build a strong application, but also a strong network within the community as part of that. And so that could maybe be prioritizing those types of applications. Also to thinking about that shortening of the 3-year projects and how that would look like for beginners who are just maybe just trying to start out, and would they only apply for the first or like a small, like a 1 year, and then maybe people who are already off and running could apply for 2 years. So that would kind of help break it up. That 3 years is too long for beginners, but maybe kind of offset that for people who have already had quite a bit of funding. And then also too, one of the things, new ideas that I hadn't thought of either was to maybe do a 3-year program, but have the first year be that PIP, project identification for new folks, so that they are guaranteed 2 more years of funding to go off and run on their own. But that first year really gets them set up with a consultant to kind of help them, guide them in a way that gets them set up for those 2 years. So because they talked about the fact that even if they did apply for the 1-year consultant, let's say, and that got them going, they would have to wait for the next round to apply, and those things might die off for them. And so, so that was kind of a neat piece. And then just lastly, talking about pairing, prioritizing people who have had construction projects and want to do an education project to get those construction projects, because you can build a sidewalk, but if parents aren't comfortable or understand what's all involved in it, then you're missing that education piece. So thinking about prioritizing projects, and it might not be a Safe Routes to School construction project, but something that is related to Safe Routes to School. So that's about it.
There's some echoing of some of the concepts that other people have talked about. And in our group, I had Brian and Carolina and Dana. And please chime in if I misrepresent what we talked about, but we kind of use this idea of that there'd be a stepped up approach, or like you get an appetizer before you have the full meal deal. And then when you get into the digestive state, that's really where you're weaning off, or you're moving into different types of funding. And we had nest metaphors too, but we Brian kept going back to the full meal deal.
We kept talking about food and the whole time.
And excuse me, a couple things is really talking about on the statewide services, that there's a need, excuse me, there's a need to really look at how to assist people, how to assist those programs with sustainable funding. And if there's a way that could be a part of the statewide services as well. Dana, you brought up that there's a very effective program, or the Main Street model that Oregon Parks uses, and that's something that we might want to look at in terms of how this might be structured. The other thing is about spreading the love. We did talk a little bit about, is there a need for, very briefly, is there a need for, should there be a competitive program if you just want some services, or should, to quote Dana, can we just spread the love and not make it hard for people? Did I capture that right, Dana? Okay, so a lot of this goes to Noelle, who started back to her original question of the idea of smarter, smaller starter grants. Would they be on a 3-year cycle as well, or could they be for shorter time periods? So I think that's kind of thematically gone through these conversations. So are any clarification, anything jumped out, or you want a little more detail on? Because this is what Heidi is going to take back and create a foundation and a framework to bring back to you in May. And if other ideas come up, I would suggest putting in the chat box, or definitely following up with Heidi too. So, okay, good breakout rooms. Leanne, we're now going to move into the guiding principles discussion and the subcommittee, who did a lot of really great work and a lot of good feedback from the committee.
Great. Jumping right in. I think we can save a little bit of time here. Welcome back to your guiding principles if you've been around for a while. And if you are new, welcome to digging into our guiding principles. I wanted to give a brief history of the guiding principles and like why were we looking at them now, what some of the changes in the past have been. And then I'm going to pass it off to our guiding principles work group that got together and did some revisions, and you guys sent them comments. And so they've got some, we'll go through all of your comments and then set ourselves up for a bigger discussion around equity, racial equity, and social equity in our next meeting. But we've got a couple more questions for you before we set ourselves up for that conversation. So the history of our guiding principles, 2018 to present. They were created actually in late 2017 by the Safe Routes to School Rulemaking Committee, right after the House Bill 2017 passed earlier that year, that gave us the $10 million a year for construction projects. We had to create a whole set of rules to implement the new construction program that you're now all a part of. So our Rulemaking Advisory Committee originally created the guiding principles. And then in 2018, our advisory committee used the ones that the rulemaking advisory had created to prioritize 24 construction projects. And then in 2019, we made a couple of updates to those guiding principles and adopted them as our own, as the advisory committee guiding principles. Then also in 2019, we used those guiding principles to help us prioritize 11 education program grants through Heidi's program. In 2020, we used them again to help prioritize our 43 new construction projects. And then in 2021, we wanted to update those principles because we got a lot of new people on the committee. So this is showing what the rulemaking advisory committee decided were the guiding principles for safe routes to school: social equity, geographic equity, safety, health, communication, collaboration, coordination, and maximizing resources. And then those kind of morphed in 2019 when the advisory committee came on board. And the biggest change that happened was, instead of calling geographic equity those terms, we changed it to geographic balance, because using the word equity in two different places got really confusing. And so we really wanted to focus equity on social equity and this idea of geographic balance in spreading the money evenly across the state, because those two things were kind of in conflict with each other when we called them both equity. And then for geographic balance, both the rulemaking committee and the advisory committee kind of used this, instead of the peanut butter approach, which every part of the state gets a little bit of funding, we used a metric around, are we funding urban and rural areas? So we took a look at if we were funding, how many people we were funding outside of a metropolitan planning organization. We kind of called that rural. And then if you were inside of a metropolitan planning organization, we called that urban. And so we made sure there was a good split, that rural got a lot of funding and urban areas got a lot of funding, so that and it's generally been like 60-40, I feel like, in most of our programs between rural and urban. So we're seeing some of that balance. So in 2021, why do we want to update them now? We've got a lot of new committee members that, and we're about to make a lot of decisions in 2022. So we thought we'd pull everybody together and discuss those guiding principles. And a lot has happened in this past year. We've learned a whole lot. It's been a social uprising. We've gone through a pandemic. Things are different now, and we would like to those new ideas to be able to reflect in our guiding principles. So I'm going to pass it off to our esteemed guiding principles working group, which comprised of Dana, Carolina, Noel, and Rob. And I think Dana was going to take this first one.
Yes, I think so.
Awesome.
I'll go ahead and talk about it. So we went through all of the original versions of the guiding principles and just sort of redlined them and came to a conclusion that there was a lot of extra fluff. So on this one, we list out a lot of specific organizations and programs. And so we had combined that into just like partners. We'll work with our partners. We also, on this one, wanted to talk about meeting people where they were at, which kind of goes back to the conversation we've been having about the education program, and then added in the information about collaborating. There was some confusion on this one about like, what did we really mean in certain sections about like aligning and meaning to build on one another. And so instead wanted to clarify the language that we intend to just facilitate peer-to-peer learning and collaborate between different programs.
And we didn't have any notes from, or the committee didn't really have any additional comments for this one. So
no, this one was more just wordsmithing and sort of clarifying.
So the next one is health. And Catalina, I think the group identified, I think you volunteered to do this one. I hope you weren't,
yes.
I hope I'm not volunteering you.
No, I was volunteered.
Awesome. Good.
I mean, not volunteered, but I volunteered. Yeah, so for the health one, I actually missed the meeting that like the rest of the community members were on, or the committee members were on to talk about the specific principle, but they left it to me, and the main thing that I did was just realign the wording so it better fit with current guiding documents between ODOT and OHA. So ODOT and the Oregon Health Authority has an MOU, and staff meet quarterly to talk about how to better align some of the transportation programs and policies with the health activities happening at OHA. And the other document that I looked at is OHA's current strategic plan for public health. It's a 5-year strategic plan. And the most important thing that I pulled out of those two documents is using the terminology, the social determinants of health. And so I think when we're talking about health and transportation, we really want to go back to that framework as public health really recognizes that people's health outcomes are strongly attributed to their social, economic, and environmental conditions. And transportation is one of the big ones in the social determinants of health. So just brought that language in here and spoke a little bit more to the different health outcomes that the transportation system can impact, such as not just physical activity, but heart health, rates of vehicle fatalities and injuries, of course, mental health, and the air quality and the air that people are exposed to every day.
Great. And there weren't any real comments on this one either. So we're thinking this one is probably.
And Leanne, can you confirm that most of the committee weighed in, just for so everyone?
Yeah, we had 13 individuals weighing in, and we had about 4 or 5 people on the working group that did not weigh in because they made the draft. So we have about 18 members. So that's about everybody had a chance to weigh in. But we didn't ask for names, so I don't know who weighed in and who didn't.
Right, and I would just encourage, if there are questions that come up, or you want to have anything further about any of these, any of the guiding proposed revisions to the guiding principles, to please put in the chat box, or just raise your hand, or just chime in.
Who's on safety? Noelle, I think you're on safety. Might be on mute.
Hi, sorry, I got kicked out of the meeting there. So I don't know how long you've been on the screen.
We just got here. That's perfect timing. Back.
Okay, should I start?
Yeah, go for it.
Awesome. So, okay, safety, knowing this one is a super important one to this committee, we did spend, most of it was just sort of wordsmithing and trying to kind of shorten the language, but keep all of the important components that were in here. And folks did provide some great comments on this in the first iteration of request for comment. So we really tried to work that into the update. There was the one recommendation about just leaving the language of Vision Zero out. Because we do say we work to support Oregon's goal of 0 fatal or serious injuries on our roadways, and that we can just leave it at that, just since it's a specific program name. So that was kind of only comment on this one, but yeah, open to changing that.
All right. We'll keep chugging, but let us know if anyone has anything else that they want to talk about. maybe I'll sort of ground this in the larger picture of that. We're hoping that we can come together and adopt these next month and put the easy one, or not the easy ones, I apologize for that terminology. We put the ones that we thought would have less discussion at the front, and so as we go on, there might be more opportunity for discussion now, and then our subcommittee can work together to make some additional recommendations that bring back to this group in our next meeting, where we can fully adopt these together.
I have a comment. This is Louise.
Hi, Louise.
Going back to the health, you have physical activity, weight, heart health, and air quality and mental health. I would like to include diet, because a lot of kids are overweight. So healthy eating.
Okay, so capturing that. May I ask, do you think that's captured in, it highlights we can impact physical activity, weight, and heart health?
Specifically, I'd like to say diet.
I'm just passing, but Carolina, is there any thoughts on that, or do you have any response to that? Or
yeah, Luis, do you mind if I just take that back and ask some of my coworkers about whether that specific health outcome is related to transportation? It's definitely food access is a huge, social determinant of health. I just don't know if transportation, if diet is one of the health outcomes that's related to transportation. So I would need to go back and double check.
But you're a health advocate. You know that diet is important.
It is important, but I just want to make sure that it's an outcome that we can associate with transportation.
Great. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Can I make a comment? This is Danny.
Yeah, go for it.
I just like to support that proposal simply because some of the, like, on the planner side, some of the critical thinking about how we think about the interrelatedness of things is largely based on like departmental siloing and not necessarily based on how they are like truly interrelated. And I think, yes, transportation is not necessarily the first place you would think of in terms of where the concept of like diet, belongs. But I think that there are potential opportunities, and things like when you do training exercise, educational exercises like bicycle safety and stuff like that, like making sure you have healthy snacks and and other things that like focus on things like grocery store access and stuff like that. There are interrelatedness. So I just wanted to put in my support.
Thank you. So just to for an action, Carolina, you'll bring that back to your staff, to your colleagues to look at, and then bring with these comments that have been provided, you'll come back in May with some additional discussion. But I heard that including diet or aspects of diet, or how transportation influences diet, or the programs could support healthier diets.
And food access was also brought up in the chat by Zach.
Yep.
Yeah, I can go back and clear this with some of the folks at at OHA just to see if, I think part of it might just be about like bringing in some of the other elements of social determinants of health and how they're related.
Cool. Perfect. Excellent. All right. I think we're moving on to maximize resources.
I think that is Rob. Yeah.
Yes. So to some extent, this was to really focusing more on how to both help under-resourced communities and like help bring other resources to the table. Whereas the way it was written before was a little more focused on sort of the processes that communities use, and that's which is addressed more in the revised communication and collaboration principle. And let's see, people had a couple of questions. Leveraging external resources is just that any other resources that can help move these programs and projects forward. And somebody asked about cost effectiveness. You know, we could talk about that. I mean, that I think there's different ways of seeing that, whether that's part of maximizing resources, but I think that it's the idea of spending less, being not frugal, but just being efficient in how you're spending your funding related to what you're delivering, whether it's a capital project or a program. Do people have any thoughts on that one? Would they like to see that kind of language brought back into this?
This is Luis again. There was some discussion a few meetings ago about project readiness. If the project is good to go.
Well, and that's there's definitely an emphasis on that there's an emphasis on that in the scoring. That's a big part of how grants are successful, is that, you know, the readiness. But that's not, I guess we just don't see that as part of maximizing resources. I mean, I guess it is part of it.
It could be seen as like making sure that the projects get spent in that time frame. Like if it can't be spent, basically, if someone applied for a project that wasn't ready yet, they should wait for the next cycle, and we should fund people who are ready this cycle.
Luis, just to make sure you see it is referenced in the last bullet here, supporting less resource communities in project and program readiness. So I think that's still part of the principle.
I like that.
Okay.
I like that very much.
This is Lonnie. I'm actually the one that asked about mentioned the cost effectiveness. I guess, and I apologize, I'm new to the team here, and I might be missing the mark entirely, but I'll put this out there. Just looking at it in a benefit cost kind of in that lens of maximizing our resources. If there are two opportunities side by side to spend an equal amount of money, which one's going to have the most benefits coming out of it? And that just seems to me, that's what I was putting into the maximizing the resources.
Yeah, I think that's a great I was just gonna say, I think that's a great idea.
Okay, that's all I meant by the cost effectiveness. Feeling like that it's not the same thing as delivering an effective solution. You know what I mean?
I think I don't know, Leanne, I don't know what you think about this, Leanne, but I think that's something that we've struggled with a little bit in terms of the scoring, because it's more based on the context of the project than on what you're delivering.
Yeah, and how we ended up doing it the last cycle was we did use it as a tiebreaker. So that was kind of what Lonnie was saying, but we did how we defined cost effectiveness was, and we actually didn't end up using it. So we didn't have a tie, but we decided if we needed a tiebreaker, we would fund several smaller projects as opposed to a larger project. At that moment in time, that was how we were thinking about cost effectiveness, is like a lot of small projects is going to be more projects than one large one, one complicated large one. Other conversation we've had a couple of times is around how many students are you impacting? Never gone that route because of this balance between rural and urban, and not wanting to give a huge ding to rural communities who just don't have a lot of students. But as a tiebreaker, that might be something that we want to look into. So we have never done it by number of students impacted. We have done it by small project versus one large project. That's how we've discussed it in the past.
That makes sense.
And you're doing a great job bringing like John Vile back to the group. John,
I was totally thinking that. What if we added a bullet? Something like consider cost effectiveness as part of project selection or something like that?
I think that would be great. Yeah, I would appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks for listening to my 2 cents. And yeah,
no, it was perfect.
Thank you.
So Rob, your suggestion is to add another bullet about cost effectiveness.
Right.
And would you define that? How would you define that?
Well, I just suggested some language. Consider cost effectiveness as part of project selection.
Okay.
And
but
then
it could
still,
be, that's just a suggestion. I don't know if that fits the tone of the principles, if it's too specific.
Leanne, I missed your point.
oh no, I was gonna say leaving it loose might give us some flexibility to sort of redefine it as we need to. That feels okay to me, unless everyone is like, no, we really want to narrow in on what cost effectiveness means right now, and then we could make it more specific. Sometimes looser, it's a little bit better.
I like that. And I was just going to add, I feel like we put this into bullets because we recognize that this principle is trying to accomplish a lot. So we wanted to be clear about all the different components. So I think that makes sense to add another bullet. And yeah, keep it a little vague, but have it there so that we consider it when we are using these principles.
Anything else, Rob?
No.
We'll keep moving, but we can come back here if folks think of other things. But we're going to move on to geographic balance, which I believe Dana is on for this one.
And this one's so easy because the only thing we added was the term technical assistance. And that was just to sort of broaden, you know, the scope of what Safe Routes to School does, from just funding to adding in that technical assistance language.
And I pulled this comment actually fit in two different categories, and just as comments came in, it sort of fit in under geographic balance, but I also put this comment in under the next slide, which is the equity slide. So if anybody wants to talk about, if someone wants to, who submitted the comment or wants to make a sort of case for talking about it here versus talking about it in equity, but it is on the next slide as well.
That was me, Danny. I was just, it was just something that's recently come up in kind of looking at distribution of populations across Oregon, and how there are a number of large Latinx populations outside of the Portland metro area that I don't think necessarily get much attention in terms of equity, because, you know, I think there's this paradigm that people perceive that urban Oregon is more diverse than rural Oregon, but that's not always the case. And so I wasn't sure if this would be a good, like, and I don't know what is already being done. So I apologize if you guys are doing work that I don't know about and I'm not acknowledging. But I was wondering, like, what the Spanish language programming is, you know, like what Spanish language programming is available, and how, you know, areas like school districts with, you know, like, what do they call it? The dual language programs are being particularly reached out to.
Yeah, those are great questions. And the short answer is not nearly well enough. So that's a perfectly great question to ask, and a really good comment for this program. And I think that we'll get into a little bit of that in the next slide as well. So thank you for bringing that up. And the bottom line is we can do a lot better. And your analysis is correct that there are a lot of communities of color in Oregon outside of the Portland metro area. So I'm gonna move us on to the last slide of the guiding principles, which I think Noelle is gonna go over.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Danny. That was a good segue into this, because I think it's super, super relevant. This one has sort of the largest change and where we got the most comments. And I do want to preface this by saying that we will spend time at the next meeting digging into this some more. So I'm actually just going to talk a little bit about why we suggested this change. And I do want to take a moment just to acknowledge that talking about this this week, when there was a pretty horrific racially motivated act of violence in Atlanta that our API community is really feeling the effects of, and that, you know, the work around racial equity is not just theoretical, but really our decisions have a big impact on people's lives, and just really wanted to acknowledge and recognize that as we dig into this conversation. So really what I just wanted to go over is why we are suggesting this change and where that came from. One of the first things we sent out was our statewide health improvement plan, which for Oregon, which calls racism a public health crisis in the state and directs all departments to advance racial equity for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. I think as an advisory body, we have an opportunity here to lead with that and take that and run with it. I also want to acknowledge that there have been a ton of reports that have come out recently around racial disparities, specifically in transportation, both from ODOT on pedestrian fatalities and Multnomah County and Oregon Walks, all in the last month, I think. And they all say the same thing, that people of color experience massive disparities when it comes to transportation safety and feeling safe on our streets. And this is true across disciplines, not just transportation, but in education and health and jobs and housing. And even when we look at serving other marginalized communities, there are racial disparities that exist. And unfortunately, they are consistent and they are pervasive. And without leading explicitly with race, we have the potential to continue those disparities. Again, I think the note that Danny put in about that, the way racial equity is, intersectional with the geographic balance principle, it's true in all the other principles as well. And those are the kinds of questions I think if we make this principle a kind of an overarching principle, it allows us to really dig into that on every component of our work. And again, we had that come up in the conversations we've had today around the education program and ways in which we can do that. So I just think it's, we wanted to be more explicit about it. And we also want to make sure that everyone feels like they have enough information and we can have a really robust conversation about this, and didn't want to just tack it on to the end of the meeting when we didn't quite feel prepared. So, so just want to acknowledge that we know there were a lot of thoughts on this, and want to give it its due time at our next meeting. So with that, I think I'll hand it off to Leanne and Chris for the next one.
Great, thank you very much. Also wanted to note that in general, most people of the comments liked the changes that we were talking about. We also got a lot of comments around wanting to still score social equity. So really, I feel like there's some work to dig into there. It's like, how do we, and we already are scoring our projects a little bit based on racial demographics, but we focus mostly on income. And so we want to dig into a little bit more about how racial equity and how we score our projects, including income, like how can all of that be structured together? So really taking into account a lot of the comments we got around scoring income and our grants. So I'll pause for a second and see if anybody has any questions, although we do have a little time. Chris and I have a question for y'all. Chris and I and the breakout subcommittee, what did I call you all? There was a word I was using earlier. It's gone.
Work group? Were we a work group?
That's it. Work group. Nailed it. The work group have a specific question for y'all, but I'll pause here for just a second and see if anybody has any more comments.
This is Luis. Good work, that subcommittee. I'd like the last sentence. Overarching principle meant to inform our approach to other principles. Yes, I like that. I affirm.
Thank you, Luis.
Any other thoughts or comments about this? And as Noelle said, we really are going to do a much deeper dive into this conversation, and it's operationalizing this kind of approach for safe routes to school and for all that principles. So it's a very valuable And as Leanne said, there's so much learning for us all to do around this and understand the impacts of the decisions that this committee makes beyond. So any other thoughts or comments? Okay. Leanne, I think, go ahead.
I'm gonna, can
yeah.
I just add one thing? Sorry, can we go for the health one? We don't, I realize I don't need to take it back to like my coworkers. If the committee, if the rest of the committee members want to add in food access, I was thinking more of like data outputs that later on we might want to track, but definitely adding in the other social determinants of health that are related to transportation, such as food access, affordable housing, you know, access to green spaces. That's fine.
Okay, great. Thanks for following up on that. Just a wee reminder too to please mute if you're not actively chatting or speaking with the committee. Great, so we'll make that note, Carolina. Thank you.
I'm going to rest on this slide for a minute, but then I'll turn it off whenever we have an opportunity for discussion. So the work group would love to know what information that you need to have an informed discussion about racial and social equity. Some of the questions that they've already asked me for more information on for the next discussion are things like, how is race included in our last competition? What data exists around race in Oregon? What can staff provide a visual of where Oregon students of color live, just so we could see what that looks like. So those are some examples of what the working group is already asking for in order to come back basically with another recommendation for you all that digs into a little bit more about how these two things relate together, the racial equity and social equity, and how that relates to our program and our work together. So we'll have this discussion today, and then we will have that bigger discussion in May, and hopefully I'll get to a point where we can adopt our guiding principles together. In the meantime, the subcommittee will work with support from staff to answer the questions that you bring up for us today, provide resources that you might need in order to learn more, and then come back and provide a recommendation to the SRAC for that guiding principle structure, like how we want to do racial equity and social equity and income as well, or how to answer those questions. So
Leanne, this is Louise.
Yeah.
There is an ODOT social equity person. She has a staff and a department. I would like to hear from her because ODOT in general needs to wrestle with this.
Yeah, so Nikatris Perkins is our social equity division administrator, and she doesn't have a large staff, but she does work with a lot of different divisions, and she has an intern right now. So, and I will say that we talked with her about this suggestion, and she is totally supportive of our committee leading with race. That's what we want to do. Her take was that we can't just sort of lump social equity under racial equity. Like if we do want to score based on income, which she suggests that we do, and I think that is a number that we have, that we wouldn't want to just lump that under racial equity, because it doesn't really fit under racial equity. It would need to be something slightly separate. So
but I would like to hear from her in general, what she's doing with the rest of ODOT.
Oh, and get like an update on the equity.
Yeah, a 20-minute presentation from her.
We can definitely ask for that. Thank you, Louise.
Leanne, I have just a quick clarification on the question that the question that was posed was how race was included in the last competitions for infrastructure and non-infrastructure, correct?
That wasn't specifically called out, but we can provide that information. So
I was just clarifying.
Yeah.
If that would be valuable for the committee to really see that for both infrastructure and non-infrastructure.
Okay. In the chat, we're hearing that both.
Okay.
Nice to see.
And then I just wanted to take advantage, Noelle, of you made a comment that a lot of reports have come out, and I don't know if the committee has had access. So like the Oregon walks, if you could possibly shoot those either to Leanne, and then those could be distributed, just that baseline. And I know, Leanne, the Government Alliance on Race and Equity is a really great report as well. Perhaps we could have a library available to the committee. The other thing too, Noelle, you mentioned the Multnomah discussion. Was that city council or county?
That was the county, and they also have a report. I can make sure that's included.
That would be great. Thank you. Any other background information? You know, this is a huge growth learning opportunity, and I think probably one of the most significant changes to how the SRAC moves forward with their chart. Or if you have more resources that you come across, if you could shoot them to Leanne, and then those can be distributed. So kudos to the subcommittee work group for all this really thoughtful, as I said, deliberation and moving the dial on this discussion. Anything that work group wants to say before we move into the next phase of our meeting, which is our wrap up? Okay. All right. Well, Leanne?
I just wanted to make sure that we had it had enough time for anyone else to ask for more resources, or if you have any other questions about what information would you need. Just double checking.
Leanne, I think this might be too specific, and this can be asked offline. But for the visual, I would love to see where Oregon students of color live, but also if there's like a supplementary information of like the modes of transportation that's, like utilized in those spaces. And I'd love to see like air quality information as well. Like if there's like a map with like those different types of overlays, that would really help me.
Air quality and mode split, is that like something that's interesting about this program is we've generally used school data to program, but some of the additional data that we need is actually census data, which mixes two data sets that aren't correlated. So we might have to do some like bottom line is, yes, we can provide this information. We'll just have to figure out how to make we might have to go all with census data or all with school data, but we'll figure out a way to make a visual.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. That's the exact kind of question that I was hoping to come out of this, so that I could have time to pull stuff together for y'all.
Great.
Deanne, I'm a history nerd. So if you could find the historical data and like things that have impacted kids walking and biking to school over the course of, I don't know how many years, so we don't make the same errors. I mean, it's all about learning from our past and continuing on to make great decisions. So with who's living in the communities, what kind of things are deterring them from what we want to see, which is walking and biking and all that kind of stuff? I know that's a big ask. If you can't do it, that's fine.
I have a quick comment on that. My son's elementary school he went to used to be served by 3 elementary schools. And the school he went to was an historic elementary school, neighborhood school, but I think people have a lot fewer kids today. And so demographics have changed a lot. And so the schools don't serve as big an area. I'm sorry, they serve bigger areas now. I mean, partially it's because of consolidation and stuff, but I think part of it is just that people have fewer kids, and so the kids are more spread out than they used to be. Just a thought.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of reasons for that. I'll see if there's any sort of like compact historical thing that we could review, especially if we can find something for Oregon. But did you have any specific about like want to know about like if we can find historical information about kids of color in Oregon, or is this just a
well, so that we're really looking at the social equity and racial equity, right? So it would be linked to that. Like the only example I could think of is like Albany. I don't know. There's a down by the river. There used to be a high in Portland. There used to be a color community there, and they were split up by the freeway, basically. And so it had this huge impact that just went to everybody. And so those are the kind of errors I do not want to do again. So that's the kind of thing that I'm looking at where you're going, okay, so this happened. Let's not, let's focus on continuing in a great way. Anyway, there you go.
No, that's a great example. It's the Albina neighborhood in Portland was split in half by the I-5 when I-5 went in that way and completely ripped the community apart. And there's a lot of that went into that redlining, providing loans for people of color, and actually have a really good video that I can share with you all. A presentation that Jessica Horning and I did for ODOT staff covers some of those examples. And there are a couple of, as an OPB movie called Lift Every Voice, that has a great historical perspective of race in Oregon. And yeah, so I'll stop there. But those are things that I can pull together and send around as part of our homework for our next meeting. And there are probably going to be more things in that homework than you'll have time to do, but I'll try to help tell you what the things are so that you can do some learning on some of those things. That's a great idea.
Yeah, something I've been looking at in the metro region, but I think could be applicable across the state too, is how the impacts of gentrification on school population and then travel needs for kids. There's a lot of, historically Black schools where families may be pushed out of that neighborhood, but are still traveling to that school because there's a, cultural relevance there. And I was trying to figure out ways to better understand that, whether it's looking at the school population versus the census tract that school is in, because then when you think about, well, if we do a walking school bus program at that school, it might only serve the wealthier white families that live there now. And so I just thought that might be an interesting look at if there are big differences in some of those census tract versus school. I'm not saying, Leanne, I don't want you to have to go on this massive GIS journey, but it's something we're working on in Metro too. So I'd be happy to collaborate on that.
Yeah, it's actually one reason. Yeah, that's been a reason why we still use the school population data as opposed to the census data for how we pick where we put projects, just because we don't want, anyway, but I feel like you can see it. I thank you for asking that question, and I don't know if I will have an answer for you by next month, but it's one I think about a lot as well. So
it sounds like there's quite a bit of footwork.
Yeah, I know. I may or may not be able to provide all of this, but I will give it a good try. And
I would just put a plug into the committee with Leanne doing all the footwork, that everyone makes a commitment to read some of the reports and to come to that May meeting with a more enhanced understanding of this question and this discussion. There's my pitch. Okay, I think we're ready to move on, and that chat box is what controls us right now.
Yeah, I just now looked back at the chat box. So if there's anything in there that that we didn't say out loud that folks want to. Vanport, Albina, yeah.
So moving on to next steps, I think.
Moving on. Next steps. Hey, we are right on time. Oh my gosh. I love being on time. Okay, so the we wanted to Heidi and I wanted to highlight the next steps again. You've seen this slide earlier in Heidi's presentation, but I wanted to point out the changes that we made and why. So basically we are not rushing, but we're more quickly making some of the decisions on the education program so that this year we can also work on priorities for the construction program. Heidi and I sat down to start looking at 2022 recently and realized that it would be great to run our timelines very close together so that we can communicate it all out together, so that we can do outreach together, so that communities can sign up for education and construction in the same swoop if they'd like to. And so in order to do that, we need to talk about construction projects and construction priorities this year as well. So by the end of this year, we will have a scoring matrix for the education program as well as for the construction program. And then early 2022, we can start getting that information out there so people can start applying for those programs. So that's the movement that you see. We took the September meeting and combined that with the July meeting and then added that we would start talking about construction this September. And we think it'll all still work out. We don't think we're rushing anything. We actually think that we had a little bit too much time to talk about education so that this should work. Are there any questions about this schedule update or about all the great work we're going to do in 2021? Great. The other thing I wanted to give a quick update on is the next steps around the Safe Routes to School strategy, which we are in this process, we're renaming the Safe Routes to School Strategic Needs Assessment because we realized after further investigation that was kind of more what it was. It was a list of all of the needs and all of the things that we think we need in order to meet those needs. And that's really helping us figure out what programming to create this year with your help, with our technical assistance help. But it really was more of a needs assessment that we've been working on. So we've taken your feedback and we added it into this draft needs assessment, and it will eventually turn into a Safe Routes to School strategy, probably at the end of this year. So we're in the process of trying some of those ideas that we've identified in that strategic needs assessment. So we will have an update for you at our next meeting, but just so you know, it's still in the draft. We don't anticipate having like a final strategy till the end of this year, and we will you'll see it again a couple of times throughout this year as we try things and learn through that needs assessment. But that's where we are with that. Wanted to let you know the update on that piece. And I think I'm going to pass it off to Chris to do a little bit of a check-in before Rob can close us all out.
So with the mindset of there's only room for improvement and to make these virtual meetings a little less stilted and boxed up, it's really important if you can give us feedback on what worked well, what would you like changed. That's helpful, and there's I think this is the time, it is your time, valuable time that you're spending here. So if you can tell us just a quick meeting check-in. I prefer not to call on people. So if folks just want to chime in or put something in the chat box, that would be helpful.
Trevor just pointed out the meeting's May 20th, not the 21st.
Yeah, I was like, oh no, good job, Trevor.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good check-in.
Yep.
Get the dates right. Check. Love the breakout rooms, more discussion from the committee. Longer breakout rooms.
Yes, longer breakout rooms.
Okay, and then I would encourage folks, if you have other ideas, and you don't want to put them in the chat box or say them out loud, please speak with Leanne about it, because this is your time. And I know we're all on Zoom a lot, so it can get a little, well, not lonely, but it can just get sitting for a long time, and we don't have that interaction as much as we do. So we're trying to make the best out of this, and soon, hopefully, we'll be together again.
I like the warm-up exercise. That was good.
Well, that's thanks to your chair and vice chair. So
yeah, I'm also happy to collect if anyone has any questions that they're like, I want to spend 2 minutes listening to someone else tell me this. Feel free to send those my way. Also, feel free to all of the resources that folks are mentioning in the chat. If you could email those to me whenever it's convenient for you in the next week or two, that would be awesome. And I can start compiling some of those resources together. We really appreciate it.
And I just want to say thank you to everyone for all of your feedback and the breakout rooms. And after, please feel free to email me or Leanne separately if you have any thoughts after the fact. And this will really help me to kind of gear our conversation for the next meeting. And I'm super excited to hear what everyone has said. So I appreciate any insight you've given today. Thank you for all your passionate words of wisdom for us to make a better program.
Hey, Leanne and Heidi, since there's a little time, can I just throw an idea out of the table a minute? Would that be okay? So I don't remember if Heidi mentioned this in her presentation, that I think the STIP has another $1 million starting in 2024 for safer to school education. Is that right? And so that's something to look forward to, because that's doubling the funding. And so that'll make, sorry, go ahead, Heidi.
Yeah, so it's not an extra $1 million a year. It's just an extra $1 million over 3 years. So it would really be, yeah, it would really be just like 1.333 per year. Yeah.
Okay. So sometimes ODOT learns that there's more federal funding coming available than was anticipated. And then the ODOT staff will typically put a proposal together for the Oregon Transportation Commission. And I'm not an expert on the different kinds of federal money, but my sense is that a lot of it's pretty flexible and that it could be used for safer to school education. And I wonder whether like our committee and maybe the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee that Mavis is part of could possibly make a recommendation to the OTC that if more money becomes available, that more be put towards the education. Now, often it's like tens of millions of dollars that becomes available. So, another $500 to $1,000, $2 million, it wouldn't be a huge impact to the rest of ODOT's funding programs and capital programs, but I think it would have a huge impact on our ability to deliver safer to school education and encouragement programs around the state.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. We appreciate that. Maybe Leanne or Chris or Susan, if they're on, can speak to that.
I'll just say, Rob, in our preparation for 24 to 27 STIP, we did take into consideration staff capacity quite a bit with the education request, and after conversations with Heidi, kind of looked at that like additional $1 million as a reasonable addition based on the fact that she's just one person with half time specifically devoted to the program. So I think that any sort of like committee like request in this realm would need to take that into consideration as well. So that's just wanting to let you know kind of how we were thinking through that additional $1 million request.
A lot of the work is done by consultants, and I think that a lot of the on a similar note, the transportation options program, I think had a huge funding increase, which I totally support, but that was a much larger increase, I think, and that also has one staff person.
Yeah, that is, I'm talking. Okay, Sorry, technical difficulties. But we did do a $2 million increase for transportation options in anticipation of a statewide eco rule. So as part of the executive order around climate change, the difference between, one of the big differences between Heidi and Stephanie Millar's program, so TO, transportation options versus the Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure, is that Stephanie Millar, that TO money goes as a direct distribution to transit, a lot of providers, opposed to the kind of higher administrative burden of grants specifically.
Sure.
It's worth a conversation. I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah,
but
I will say that Heidi and I are working really hard to set up the Safe Routes to School program to grow. So that's been our work over the last 2 years, realizing that we have limited staff capacity and we do max out. So we're trying to restructure things so that the program can be set up in a way to grow. And I don't think that our staff capacity at all should limit this committee or the Oregon Bike and Ped Advisory Committee from saying what you think the needs are. Again, staff can't write those letters, but we can help organize you all in a way so that you can write letters together.
Sure. And maybe some of this is, I don't know, it seems like there's like a resistance, and it's probably because of the legislature, something to adding more staff, that you guys are limited in the ability to do that. And so that might be helpful for advocates to know, including like League of Oregon Cities, to know like, well, how can we help with that? But like, it seems like right now we have a quarter staff person for the whole state of Oregon that for ODOT focuses on pedestrian and bicycle education, right? That's a quarter of Heidi's time. Shouldn't a state like Oregon that's got this great national reputation for prioritizing walking and biking, and yet we only have a quarter of someone's time focused on education around that, for safety around that, is kind of crazy. So anyway, just putting some ideas out there. Sorry for taking the meeting over on this topic, but you know, if anyone is interested in talking offline about this too, I'd be happy to do that.
All great points, Rob. We can make when I meet with you and Carolina to talk about the next meeting, we can talk about making time in this space or time outside of this space for whatever conversations you all want to move forward.
And what advocacy role the SRAC might want to take, and what those avenues are. Okay, Rob, I think you are the last moment on the agenda.
Hi, well, I just want to thank everyone for participating today. I think we had some great discussions and breakout rooms, and really appreciated everyone's feedback on the revised principles, and look forward to continued discussion on that in our May meeting. So thanks everybody.
Thank you, everybody. I'd like to say thanks to Noelle for bringing to our attention the tragedy of this week and the violence towards our Asian and Pacific Islander community in the United States. And I'd like to also at the same time say congratulations to Carolina for bringing a new tiny coworker into our team. So holding both of those two things as we leave this meeting, but also wanted to say thank you and goodbye to everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have
He's
a
a
lovely
little
afternoon. Yeah, congratulations. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
So I'm going to end this meeting, but then everyone should get back on this meeting so that we can do our debrief. So I'm gonna end it, but I'll see staff in a minute.
Okay.
Bye.